From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Governor Raimondo's budget proposal is now in the hands of lawmakers. The $8.6 billion tax and spend plan will make its way through the House Finance Committee first before being considered by the full House and eventually Senate. Plus, a pension settlement cloaked in secrecy set to be voted on by labor unions Monday. Any changes to the 2011 pension reform law will have to be approved by the General Assembly. It's lining up to be a busy session on Smith Hill. Joining us in studio this week on Newsmakers, Democratic State Representative Joseph Shekarchi of Warwick and Republican State Representative Daniel Reilly of Portsmouth. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel is WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and we welcome everyone to the program. Reps, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, let's start with the pension settlement. We'll get to the budget in a little bit, but this is sort of top of everyone's mind this week because public sector unions are poised to vote on a proposed settlement on Monday, and this is a proposed settlement to the reform law that passed in 2011. What is your understanding of what's in this deal, Representative?
I have no idea, and that's the truth. We have not been briefed. I don't know. I read about what I read on Ted Nesi's blog. I read about it in the newspaper. We've heard bits and pieces of it, but we haven't been briefed on it. There's a judge has imposed a gag order, and to the best of my knowledge, most parties have been following the gag order, so we don't know the details. I will say this, that the deal has to come back to the General Assembly for us to ratify or to vote on, and the devil is in the details for me. I need to see what's in that proposal before I commit to voting for or against it. And one of the questions I have is this a settlement for all the unions or for most of the unions? So I don't know that. We have not been briefed by any party, including Justice Williams.
And we have, the pension law saved the state $4 billion. My guess is you have no idea, Representative Reilly, what the impact to that savings would be in this settlement. I mean, you must be as in the dark as everyone else.
Right. And as Rep. Shekarchi had said, there could be a major impact on the budget. We would have to change the law that we pass no matter what. So that could throw this budget in flux to an extent if we have to pay out more this year or however which way that the settlement goes. The entire process has struck me a bit odd as a lawmaker because I was under the impression initially when the unions challenged the law that they were challenging the constitutionality of what they asserted as a contractual right that they felt was being broken. And then the judge sent it to mediation, which was to me somewhat odd because we're not really getting an answer on the constitutionality question.
So you think it should go to trial? You think the constitutionality of the law should...
I do. I think both sides, personally, I think both sides have compelling cases here. I think the state has a significant burden to meet, but I think this is an issue that really should be settled. I think because there is such a question there, and impacts so many people, I think it should be settled by the courts. And then we, of course, as legislators, always have recourse to take a court decision and amend the law in a way that would make it constitutional if they ruled against us, or the law would stand if the judge allowed the ruling to stand. This is a gray area that, to me, is casting. It could cast parts of the law in doubt, but could force us to change the budget because of a settlement that we actually weren't even parties to.
What do you think, Representative Shekarchi?
I have a different take. I think a settlement is a good thing if it can be comprehensive and informs it and impacts everybody. I just again the devil's in the details, but generally there's a lot at stake here. We've already saved a lot of money. If we have to go back and look at some savings that we paid, this could be a budget catastrophe for us going forward. Also, I think the cost of litigation is very expensive. To agree with Representative Reilly, it does impact a lot of people, and it is significant, and this could have budget impacts down the road, but the cost of litigation, because it impacts so many people, it's not going to be settled by the Superior Court and Judge Sarah Taft Carter. It's going to go to the Supreme Court at a minimum, and maybe even higher. So if we can reach a comprehensive settlement that banks the majority of the savings, puts this issue behind the General Assembly, and we can concentrate on jobs, the economy, and all the other legislation that's before us, then I think it's a good thing. Now, that's not to say I support this settlement, because I haven't seen it, but overall, I think a settlement is a good thing when all the parties agree.
Now, do you think obviously the majority of lawmakers are Democrats in the same caucus as you, Rep. Shekarchi. Do you think most of your fellow Democrats share that view that they would like to settle it if they can agree to the numbers that are in here, or do you think there's a lot of resistance?
I don't think I haven't taken any straw polls, so I don't want to speak for the whole caucus, and I'm not the speaker, but I can tell you that the general feeling, I think, by most of the Democrats that we would like to see this issue put behind us, because it does have an effect on everything we do going forward. It's like the big 800-pound elephant in the room. When's it happening? How much is it going to cost? Are we going to go to trial? Is it going to come back here? It tends to dominate. It's an important issue, and it's a significant issue. It tends to dominate the legislative session.
And we're operating in the dark in many respects. Leaks here, leaks there. Should the judge lift the gag order, Representative Reilly?
Well, I would certainly love it if she lifted the gag order. It would certainly help us, particularly because this isn't like a regular mediation, because it has to go to the legislature in order for it to take effect. So I think it would be very helpful if the gag order could be lifted.
Rep. Shekarchi, the judicial branch is essentially telling the executive branch it can't talk. Are you concerned about that?
A little bit. Separation of powers. I will say this. I know Sarah Taft Carter. I find her to be a good judge. She put a gag order on for a reason. I would prefer much of it was as open as possible. But there's a reason, and you have to give her the benefit of the doubt, and the parties the benefit of the doubt. So I don't know the reasons behind it. I would prefer it be open to the public and the legislature and all of us, so we can all have a full vetting. But I think it will become. It has to at some point, and I think it will become, and it will have a full vetting. I can assure you of this, that the public process, as far as the House goes, will be televised hearings. It'll be open debate in committee. It'll be an open debate on the floor. So we might not know the details now, but we'll know the full details before we'll vote on this bill.
Dan?
From a separation of powers perspective, my biggest concern is not so much the gag order, because as you said, I think that's more the governor's office and the executive branch that's the focus of it. It's that what I don't want the takeaway from this case to be is that if you have an issue with a law that's passed by the General Assembly, you can go to court and then mediate with parties who weren't a part of that lawmaking process to come up with a version of the law you think should be the case.
He has a point, Representative Shekarchi.
I agree, but the ultimate say is with the General Assembly. They're the ones who enacted the law and passed the law, and they're the ones who will either pass or reject this settlement. Just because the judge has imposed a gag order, or just because the parties have agreed to the settlement, doesn't mean it's going to happen. It still needs to be voted on by the House of Representatives and the Senate. So
now we know, as Tim said, there's a vote Monday, there are other votes, and we've heard all the voting needs to be done by next Friday. I know you said you don't know what's in the settlement now, but have you been told when you'll be briefed on it, when you'll get information, anything like that?
None whatsoever. I know that last year, when there was the proposed settlement, we in the House did have a briefing on it, but that was after the unions had started to vote on it. We have not been scheduled a caucus or any kind of a vote or briefing by House leadership yet. I don't think they know, or they may have just found out about it. This, as you guys both know, this was very fast breaking. It all came down this week in the last 3 days. So I assume within the next week or two we will be briefed, but we have not been yet.
All right, let's move on to the budget. And very simple question to start off the conversation here. We'll start with you, Representative Reilly. Yes or no, would you pass Governor Raimondo's budget as it stands right now?
No.
Representative
No.
Shekarchi. Okay, both a no. Why? We'll start with you, Dan. Why no?
Well, I have some significant issues. Well, let me say this. I do agree with some parts of the budget. I think there's some creative, innovative ideas that I think I would certainly support in the final version that gets passed. I like the idea of high school students being able to take college credit. I like the idea of some of the real estate incentives they're talking about from a statewide level. Certainly the occupational licenses being reviewed. What I don't like is almost a third of the budget deficit being balanced on, or being cut rather, with one-time revenue fixes, a lot of the debt restructuring. I understand that the argument is that we're putting them into one-time investments, but I just don't think those investments, quite frankly, are big enough to really achieve scale where we're going to see that statewide return. I disagree with the idea of a statewide property tax. I understand, the idea is to put it on properties over $1 million. I think the way it's
second homes
on second homes, correct. But I think the way it's currently worded now, and I know the governor's office in the last 48 hours has indicated that there may be some drafting that went in a direction they didn't want to go in. So I'll take them at their word on that with regards to properties it would cover. I would say this, my biggest concern with that isn't so much the properties it covers, it's that this is really the camel's nose coming under the tent, and we are now creating a statewide property tax. And as we all know, it starts at $1 million properties, and then a budget deficit needs to be filled, and we need an extra $5 million here, and it goes to $800,000, and it goes down. And I see this as becoming the next estate tax, quite frankly.
And Representative Shekarchi, you also said, as it stands now, you would not pass the budget.
That's correct.
Why?
I haven't vetted the whole budget. That's the Finance Committee. They're going through. There's one particular article I don't like, and which is to stop public advertising in the Providence Journal or in local newspapers. I think that it's still a viable public option. I know there's a cost to that, but we should definitely keep that in place.
That alone would prevent you from passing this budget. And you have some interest in this budget, so that would hold it up.
Yes, it would. But I believe that the General Assembly will address that. I have full faith and confidence in the Finance Committee and Chairman Gallison, who worked very, very hard reviewing every single line of that budget.
You're about to get some favorable press from the Providence Journal.
One can only hope. One can only hope. But I believe that also. Maybe there is cost alternatives. Maybe we can do it in local newspapers. Maybe we can do it in different venues. But we need to keep public access to information, to public meetings. I think that's important. I know it's the internet age, and I'm an older person, so I'm tending to get with the program on the internet. But there's still some people who don't use the internet for their primary source of information. So we have to preserve that.
I'm curious what you think about that statewide property tax proposal. There's the drafting issue in apartment buildings, as Rep. Reilly said, but more generally, he says, this is the first step toward another property tax, a statewide one. What do you think of the idea?
I have some concerns and some reservations about it. I need to look at it. I think Representative Reilly's correct. The drafting of that bill could have been done a little bit better, and that's why we have the Finance Committee to be looked at. I generally don't like taxes. I don't know anybody who does. But the budget had, they had to raise revenue. They have to move forward with programs. If we're using that money somewhere productive, effective, transformative, forward-thinking, that creates jobs, that does something, then I'll consider it. That in and of itself is something to consider. I'm not committing either way on that.
I want to stick with you, Rep. Shekarchi, because a key piece of the budget is your proposal that's gotten a lot of attention for a tax credit for employers who add jobs. The governor says she wants to add it, but there's no details about it. Apparently you guys are still in discussions. What's the status of talks about getting a formal version of that she'll include in the budget?
Well, as you know, this is the third year in a row I've put in my jobs bill. This year it has a lot more momentum behind it. The Speaker has been a very strong proponent, and the governor in her budget address has talked about it. My original idea, which is still valid and still alive in the General Assembly, would create a tax credit for every job that's created. It takes an existing program that already exists right now and expands it. I have been working very hard with my Senate counterpart, Senator Sheehan. I've been working in his policy people and with Stephen Pryor, the Commerce Secretary, to see if we can come together and make this a better bill. So I'm looking at different alternatives. That's why the bill hasn't been posted for a hearing yet, but it will be shortly. I'm looking at alternatives in a way that we can maybe make this a revenue neutral bill. Maybe look at it in a way, because my current bill has about a $7 million fiscal impact. $7 million we don't have in the budget. We don't have hanging around the General Assembly. So what do we need to do to solve the problem? Maybe we can look at this, keeping the tenets of transformity, keeping the job in place, keeping the benefit, and saying maybe we can limit the amount of the tax credit or tax benefit that we're going to give the company to the actual amount of tax revenue that the new employer paid. Also, I want to look if can we have a certification process? Can we, excuse me, can we make it so that if a company was already going to hire new people, they wouldn't qualify for that? So I'm studying all these things. I'm working with all the parties involved, working diligently. We met yesterday with the Commerce Secretary, talked this morning with his Chief of Staff. We're looking for ways that we can come to consensus and move a bill, not because it's my bill or not because the governor wants to speak on it, but because it's effective and it works. So if we can get there, we have a lot of smart people weighing in on it. I'm all about compromise. I'm all about getting the job done.
All right, we got to take a break on the program. Our guests this week are Democratic State Representative Joseph Shekarchi and Representative Dan Reilly, Republican from Portsmouth. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation and talk about a possible move of the Paw Sox to Providence. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, Joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Our guests this week are Democratic State Representative Joe Shekarchi and Republican State Representative Dan Reilly. Ted.
Rep. Reilly, start with you on this one. The new owners of the Paw Sox came on this show recently, Jim Skeffington, and suggested they'll seek free land in Providence for a new stadium, as well as possibly a state-subsidized lease to make the finances work. Are you open to giving them that to get this done?
We haven't seen the specifics of any plan in general. I don't know of any free land in the city of Providence for them to get, and I would be hesitant to sign off conceptually, at least, to a lease agreement. I think that it would certainly be something we would have to look at in detail. I mean, there is a lease agreement in place now with McCoy Stadium, so it's not unprecedented. But I think we're certainly in an environment where any economic development and assistance deal like that's going to receive great scrutiny. I personally believe that the current proposal for that parcel, I don't think is appropriate for that particular piece of land. I think as it's presently permitted, it should continue as a park. But that's my personal belief, and like I said, we haven't seen a specific plan from them, so I look forward to getting that.
Shekarchi, how about you? What do you think of this ballpark proposal?
Same thing as Dan. We haven't seen it. Not to keep saying the same thing, but the details are very important here. We have to look at it. I'm not opposed, but I want an awful lot of vetting. I want to make sure it works, and I don't want to take any proponents' studies or assertions. I want an independent review. And I have full confidence in the Commerce Department, Commerce Secretary, the people over there to do that. But I want to see independent traffic reports, economic impact statements. I want to see what effect it has. If it's beneficial to the state, I'm for it. I'm not afraid to do it. I'm not afraid because of people say, oh, well, 38 studios, it's another deal. We can't keep ourselves down or afraid of doing bold, innovative things that help the state because of 38 studios. That was a bad thing. It was by bad administration. It was done a long time ago. We need to move forward from that. But we should learn from that, and we should make sure we do our due diligence and make sure the deal works. It's not about the people. It's about the deal. It's about the proposals, the tax revenue, the economic benefit. If it works, then I'm in favor of it. If it doesn't work, I'm not.
Earlier this month, Gordon Fox was charged in a public corruption case. You both have served with him. He has already pled guilty. First, I wonder, Representative Reilly, your reaction to what happened earlier this month.
Well, I think because everything's really been happening in slow motion and then finally concluded this past month, it really has been a whole year of shock over the whole situation. Having worked with Gordon and known Gordon, I feel bad for him and everything he's going through, and also understand that he's put himself in a very difficult position, and certainly put the General Assembly and the state in a difficult position, because now we have to endure yet another round of a politician going to jail, someone who is in power at the State House. So I think it's an extremely unfortunate situation, and I think it's a call for greater reform of the campaign finance system. I think there are going to be changes coming down the pipeline, and it's unfortunate that it takes a guilty plea of a sitting speaker or a former speaker of the House to get those reforms made. But I think this is going to be the call to action.
Rep. Shekarchi, one of the reforms that's being called for is to put the teeth back into the Ethics Commission. Should the General Assembly tackle that? Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, I do. I do think we should do that and a bunch of other things. We should.
Your speaker is clearly lukewarm on tackling Ethics Commission this year.
That's his opinion. I value and support him, but I'm entitled to my own opinion as well. So,
are you sure?
Yes, I'm positive. I'm absolutely positive. That's my opinion. And if the bill hit the floor, I would vote for it. I think it's time. I also think we should tighten up the campaign finance laws. I think we should have audits of them, and I think maybe we should hire more people at the Board of Elections to randomly audit. I think we should attach a finance statement, a bank statement, at least on a yearly basis. I think we should separate. We should have commingling. We should have somebody else designated as the treasurer. I mean, there's a lot of little fixes we could do that go a long way. It's very similar. As an attorney, we have a client's account that's sacrilegious, that you can't touch and you have to separate, and you can't commingle funds at all. And I think campaign accounts should be the same way.
What do you say to people who think this is standard operating procedure up at Smith Hill. That, you know, people are on the take, this happens. You know that attitude just permeates.
It does, and it's sad, and it's understandable. It's sad. People think because you're in power, you're corrupt, and you can't get around that. I will say this, the misconduct that Speaker Fox did not affect his job as a speaker. It was his role on the licensing board in Providence, and it also was his own campaign fund. So there was at least everything that we've seen to date, and I have no reason to doubt what we've seen because I have full faith and confidence in the U.S. Attorney, the FBI, the state police, that if there was more misconduct, they would have brought it out. So none of his misconduct had to do with his role as Speaker.
You're a Republican. Do you agree with that? That Gordon Fox, it was just, you know, there's no bigger question here about the Democratic Party's choice of leaders?
Well, I'd be always the first to criticize where I think it's appropriate. In this case, I would agree with Joe. This is, and not just as a sitting House member, because I was out at the time when this really all started. This does appear to be an isolated incident involving him. I have no reason to believe otherwise. I don't think the law enforcement has indicated otherwise, too. That doesn't mean we're not in desperate need of a lot of reforms at the state. I think this, you know, this gets people's attention, and it's unfortunate that they then would connect this with other people who hold elected office, but I don't think that this should reflect poorly on the Assembly as an institution because it really had nothing to do with the Assembly.
We were talking before that about Speaker Mattiello. I have a question for you, Rep. Shekarchi. You're close to Speaker Mattiello, and you've been close for years to Governor Raimondo. There have been multiple stories suggesting tension between the two of them as they start to, you know, feel around who's in charge up there. Do you think they have a problem getting along right now?
No.
You really don't?
I don't at all.
What do you make of those stories then?
There's stories. I mean,
you don't think it got off to a rocky start?
No, I think there's always, every speaker and every governor is going to have tension, and that's the nature of the positions they hold. Personally, they get along very well. They spent the budget address laughing and joking. I took pictures together after the governor gave her speech. They meet regularly, and I've told them both. I said, as long as you continue to communicate, you'll never have a problem. And as long as they communicate, they'll get along well. There's some issues they differ. I mean, I don't agree with everybody on everything. I don't agree with Dan on everything. I'm sure he doesn't agree with me. But it's how you conduct yourself and how you comport yourself. There's going to be issues that they're going to disagree from time to time, but overall they get along very well. They both have the same vision for Rhode Island, and they're very much alike. They're both very committed family people. They're Italian. They're lawyers. No, but they share the same culture of family and food and just of their heritage. There's a lot of commonality there, and they both get along well, and they both will continue the same priority, which is to move the economy forward, move the state forward.
Rep. Reilly, how you served when Governor Chafee was the governor. Now we have Governor Raimondo. I'm just curious, are there noticeable differences at the State House as you have a change of administration, or do things just roll along the same?
No, I think there's definitely a noticeable difference, and in a positive direction. I think Governor Raimondo and her staff are much more aggressive. They obviously have a very thorough plan. I think they articulated a lot of what they want to do in the budget, but in her appointments and in bringing people particularly from out of state, we have a lot of new faces. I think that's a good thing. I certainly want to get to know them better, but I think that's a good thing that we have new people here. And there's a palpable sense of energy. There are a lot of young people in the State House, which I notice because I normally bring the age down a bit. But I think that's good, and I think she has a lot of people engaged who obviously weren't engaged in the previous administration, so I think that bodes well.
Rep. Shekarchi, a proposed bill would give the ability for parents to have their kids opt out of the new park exam. Would you vote to pass it?
The park exam is the school testing?
Yes.
I don't know enough about it. Generally speaking, no. I would trust the education professionals, but I don't know the specifics of that bill. And I'll be happy to, if I look at it, give you a more concrete answer. But generally speaking,
sounds like you think kids should take the test.
Yeah, I do.
Rep. Reilly?
Yeah, and I've actually had a few constituents reach out on this and say, let's keep the integrity of the test. Let's not allow people to opt out. I've heard more from them, but I actually haven't heard from a single person to say otherwise. Now, my email may change this afternoon or after Sunday, but I have heard from people, and they have a very credible case to make. That
what do you
really
make of the parents that want to opt their kids out of the test? I mean, there are a lot of them. So what do you make of that?
I think there's a lot of controversy. Well, we know there's a lot of controversy around testing in general, and I think that's unfortunate because I don't think what we have is perfect, and I don't think we're going to achieve perfection or anything close to it in a long time. What I'm always reminded about is what Massachusetts accomplished 20 years ago now, when when they went from a rather mediocre state in terms of public education to the best state for public education in this country, and it revolved around testing. Now, they tried a lot of things, they had to work out a lot of kinks, but they did it. And I don't want to see us right next to them being in an uncompetitive position because we're not trying the things that we know can work.
All right, we're running short on time, so quick political question for both you. Rep. Shekarchi, everyone assumes you're running for Warwick mayor as soon as Scott Avedian steps aside, will you?
No, I haven't made any decisions. Something I consider if and when. If you know something that the mayor's leaving, let me know, because he's been mayor for 14 years, and I think if Scott wanted to be mayor for another 14, he will be. So I would certainly look at that position if he decided to leave, but it's not a guarantee that I would run.
He's a Republican. You wouldn't challenge him as he's still the incumbent?
I'm very happy in the House right now, and Scott is a personal friend, so probably not. You never say never, but it's highly unlikely.
Rep. Reilly, about 30 seconds left. What does your party need to do to have a better outcome in 2018?
I think we need to focus on local races just as much as General Assembly races. When we focus on towns and cities and school committee and town council races, we can be enormously successful, and we have been. Politically, as a party, that's your farm team, and I think we have a lot of people out there in communities that may not have Republicans elected to the General Assembly that have a majority or close to it in their local bodies. So I think that's where our future is going to be.
Yes or no, support a line item veto?
I support a line item veto.
No.
No. All right. Well, we're going to end the show there, and actually we're going to end the show with a congratulations to Representative Dan Reilly, who was recently engaged. Representative, if you think passing a budget is hard, wait until you plan a wedding.
Right.
Now that is a budget you can never get enough supplemental.
I'm the groom. I have the easy job here. The budget's I actually have to show up for all the planning on this one. Yeah.
Rep. Reilly, Rep. Shekarchi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.